Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Community Better Challenge 2021 webinar focused on our Community Better Challenge grants. I wanted to thank you for your attendance and attention today. We'll be going through this in a little bit. We're just going to leave the line open so more people can come in and join us. All right, thank you again for all of our new attendees just coming into to our virtual space here today. My name is Ken Zolitar. I'm the Manager of Stakeholder Relations here at Participaction, and I'll be walking you through our Community Better Challenge 2021 grant webinar. So with that, let's get ourselves started. Today, we'll be talking about three things: the past, the present, and the future. And so it was a long, long time ago, back in 2019, where we will refresh what we did back then, where our first Community Better Challenge grant, or our first Community Better Challenge. Then we'll talk into 2021 about what's happening currently with our grants. And then I'll share with you a little bit about what we're planning on doing coming into the next couple of months as we head into June for our 2021 challenge. Just so you know a little bit of the webinar structure, as attendees, all of your microphones are muted. You can ask questions. There is a question feature within the Zoom webinar platform, and we will be answering those questions as we go. I have two of our Participaction staff who are assisting in answering the questions, and we'll take a minute to pause and stop and answer those. And then we'll also have time at the end to address those questions. And then lastly, this webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be sent to you in the follow-up email, which will come in about 24 hours after we are done. And that recording can be shared and sent along. And if there are any other additional requests, I see that there's some comments asking about particular resources. Yes, those will be shared as well. So we'll be getting those out. Every resource we have will be available and into your hands to help promote this and get your communities engaged in the challenge. So let's go back. Let's go a long, long way back to 2019, where we held our first inaugural Community Better Challenge. And so that challenge, as you can see here, took place in a similar time frame, and it's a little bit shorter than our new challenge going into 2021. So from May 31st until June 16th, we worked with you as physical activity sector leader organizations and individuals to come together as a nation to track physical activity minutes over that 17-day period. And over the course of that period, we tracked 265 million minutes of physical activity, and Participaction couldn't be happier. Shortly after the challenge ended, we were able to recognize 6 regional winners, including the most active community in Enderby, British Columbia. Back at that time, this is worth noting that we were able to administer about $600,000 worth of micro grants, with grants ranging from as little as $250 to as high as $1,000. And we were able to provide them to 950 different organizations. It is worth noting that this year, as we're looking at our micro grant pot, it is about half of that amount. And so there's a likelihood that we may not be able to fund all of the organizations that have received funding in the past, or to the same volume or like dollar figure that we had supported in the past. We are, as always, looking for additional sponsorship and support to continue to engage as many organizations as possible. But just as a kind of a note for a note for your expectations, as it stands right now, we do not have that same level of $600,000 to distribute for 2021. However, it is great to note that when we conducted our end of program surveys around the Community Better Challenge, for those that received a grant, very much agreed that it was a positive thing. So you can see that big 97% in the middle say that they agree that the grant made their program more successful. Another 79% agree that the grant helped attract more people to their event or program. and 68% agreed that they'll be able to leverage the funds beyond the event. And I want to stop here just for a minute to tell you kind of some of the things that when we think about our Community Better Challenge grants, and when we think about especially grants within the 2021 COVID-19 environment, we are sort of looking at a shift from some of those single kind of one-off big events that would bring out, hundreds and thousands of people, knowing that that may not be a possibility for many, and really looking at these grants as an opportunity to do, as that 68% stat says, to leverage funds beyond the event, or that 79% to attract more people to your event or to your organization. So the idea of having something where if you're able to use the funds to get some equipment for a program that you can then use that year round and continue to engage people in physical activity beyond just the 30 days of the Community Better Challenge and throughout the year is fantastic. Or that idea of having a try it day or involve engaging new participants to join your program or organization or event, whatever it is that you're offering, so that they can have that sample, they can have that bit to try it, and ideally kind of convert them into a long-term participant over the course of the entire year. When we think about Participaction as a whole, that really is what we're about. It's about getting Canadians active. And this challenge is one great vehicle to do that, but we are also looking at those long-term kind of sustainable impacts that we can have. And so as you're thinking about what do you want to apply for a grant, I encourage you to think about that lens. Think about that idea of kind of sustainable aspects. And so that's where equipment or new audiences are certainly eligible and encouraged as you're putting forward your application. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the 2021 grants. The grant window, so you can apply between January 25th January 25th to February 26th. And really, when we're thinking about these grants, and again, thinking around kind of COVID-19, we're really looking to encourage people to join local physical activity programming virtually. So that can be virtual or safely in person with small groups in accordance with local public health regulations. We've already gotten a few questions into our general account saying, we don't really know what the future will look like. We're not sure what we can say is this is going to for sure happen. And as a result, we can't really commit to a program because we know that things are rapidly changing these days. And so from our perspective at Participaction, we're really looking at that, encouraging people to join local physical activity, however that may be. And so again, that could be virtual. It certainly should be safely in person, potentially with small groups, potentially outdoors, and always keeping in mind with your local public health regulations. And we are looking, we're looking this year, especially kind of at this opportunity, looking at the month of June as a time of community pride, as a time to build those social connections, knowing that we have had some, it's been a little bit, we haven't been able to connect as much as we've had in the past. And so making sure that we're able to create those connections, be it virtually, physically distanced outdoors, but really celebrating that fact of re-engaging our communities. So here's just a little bit of key info. So as I mentioned, the grant window is open on January 25th through February 26th. The funding amounts, as you can see there, are varied between $250 to $1,000. I will take a moment here to say, oftentimes when we've been reviewing grants in the past, many organizations apply to say they would like to have $1,000. And oftentimes as we are trying to disperse those funds, equitably across the different provinces and territories and across the different organizations to try and maximize how many Canadians can be positively impacted by the events or programs being held, we may not allocate the full request. And so perhaps you're saying we'd like $1,000 to run our event, and we could respond saying this is a fantastic event, thank you for putting it on, in order to support all the organizations or as many organizations as possible. We can only allocate your particular event with $600. And just as again, kind of as a point of expectations to say, if you are putting together a fantastic proposal and a great event, you may not request all of the funding that you receive, knowing that we do have more demand for funding than we are able to supply. And then those next 2 points, so saying that local organizations being you, the expectation is that you host activities from June 1st to June 30th. And so if you're saying you're looking to, participate in the Community Better Challenge and host a golf tournament in August, unfortunately, that falls outside of what we're able to fund, and we won't be able to provide you with support. And then one of the things that I'm sure we well know is that when we're looking at eligible groups to receive funding, you can see on the left of your screen, the top right, we do fund schools. And so that can be any level of academic school. So from early childhood education to primary school, secondary school, colleges and universities, all of those groups are eligible to receive funding. We also fund municipalities. And we also fund national sport and multi-sport and local sport organizations to do their work. And then community not-for-profits are all eligible to receive funding. I should also mention that within municipalities, that does also include First Nations bands. And when we're thinking about, on the right side of the screen, I have those different icons for the equity-seeking groups. And that's really when we know that at Participaction, we know across Canada that in the physical activity space, there are certain health equity seeking groups that may experience barriers to being able to participate. And so when we're thinking about how can we best accomplish our goals and creating that kind of healthy, active Canada, we do want to do our best to mitigate or reduce those barriers for participation. And so again, as you're thinking about putting together an application, that is one of those key questions is what are you doing to reduce those barriers for women and girls or newcomers or people with disabilities or older adults or the First Nations Indigenous communities or members of the LGBTQI2S community. And so within all of that space, it's just something to consider as you're putting out that application, and potentially it's some ideas maybe partnering with particular groups that reach these health equity seeking groups to open those doors more clearly, as well as just kind of putting in those barrier reduction things, so reducing potentially the costs or adding some opportunity for transportation or childcare are all different opportunities in which to help get everyone active. And so here you can see it's a fairly text-heavy slide. This slide here around the eligibility guidelines is pulled directly from our grant guidelines, which are available on the Participaction webpage. But you can see there, again, we talk about the deadline to apply is February 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. The activity must take place from June 1st to June 30th. And then I do want to stress kind of these middle points here is that all recipients, so if you receive a grant for the Community Better Challenge and you are hosting your event in June, from June 1st to June 30th, you must track it on the Participaction website. And so tracking that activity entails creating an organizational profile, and after the event happens, saying, you funded us to do a particular session in, maybe it's a yoga in the park session is one of my favorite examples. And after the yoga in the park session, the organizer would in turn go into the website and say, we had 25 people participate in yoga in the park for 30 minutes, and 25 times 30 is all of those minutes going towards your local competing community score. And so in order to really track that most active community in Canada and really get that fair assessment, it is imperative that organizations track their activity and input it into our system so we can see that 265 million minutes from 2019 leapfrog into hopefully a even more engagement, even more physical activity across the country. And then so this fourth bullet there that says all recipients must complete a post-event online survey. We know that as organizations that $250 to $1,000 is a healthy amount of money to host an event or to supplement a program for a period of time. We know that it is not it's not going to change your core funding. We know that it can be used over the course of the entire year. And so we've tried to make the expectations for the grant recipients equal the amount of funding that we are providing. And so we are not expecting you to provide us audited receipts. We are not expecting you to provide a detailed final report assessing your impact. We are not expecting you to share, take photos and share proof of your event as part of the reporting protocols. All we are asking you to do is complete a short survey after the challenge happens. And that way will give us a sense of what we're doing and how we can improve for future years. So it is worth noting there that failure to track minutes or complete the survey will make the organization ineligible for future grant applications with Participaction, as we are intending on continuing this community builder challenge into future years. So I talked about this a little bit before, but identifying what can be funded. And again, I think it's smart to think about this in that sustainability lens. We know that we can't totally predict what the future holds in terms of large, maybe it's like, a school-wide or a community-wide event that would bring hundreds of people together into a public space. And we are thinking around that sustainable funding space, or ways that you can improve the, improve the ability of your program to serve people that can most benefit from it. And so you can see a list of eligible expenses, from sporting equipment to venue or space rental to transportation and nutrition. And then I mentioned before that childcare for participants during an event is certainly a fundable expense. And one of the new things one of those two new bullets for this year that again are part of our the Community Challenge grant guidelines are we're allowing for costs associated with delivering a virtual activity. And so whatever it is that may be in terms of potentially a webinar account or kind of some small digital expenses like a microphone or a headset to deliver that virtual activity most effectively. And then we've also included and explicitly stated costs associated with meeting public health guidelines. And so perhaps that is sanitation or sanitary products like hand sanitizer, or having additional signage around physical distancing. So those are certainly eligible expenses for the Community Builder Challenge. Moving on to look at what can't be funded. So these are similar to previous years. And so yeah, I'll just read them out here. So we're ineligible expenses include performance fees, capital expenditures, deficits incurred from past activities, specific prizes or awards, and think of that as if you're honoring one single person, to say we're going to give this person a bursary or an award, or competitions or expenses incurred prior to funding. So if you do have any questions about those things, feel free to connect with us. We have our contact. I'll make my contact information available, as well as our general info account, and we can help navigate some of those things. But by and large, we are looking at providing funding to support getting Canadians active in the event program space. So looking at the actual grant application, one of the things to note is that we are asking 5 primary questions. There are a few other questions that we will that are part of the survey that will be going out, or that will be made available. But really, these are the 5 things that we're looking at, and so we're trying to keep this as quick and as simple as possible for you, as noting that we're trying to be flexible. And so the first question there is to describe your event or program, including your main target audience and physical activity opportunities. Really, it's what are you planning on doing? The second question is to describe what impact this funding will have on your event. Why do you particularly need this funding? The third question talks about how your participants will be active, and that's a little bit more on the specific side. And so, we will be playing basketball. We will be going for a run. We will be engaging in some sort of other physical activity that shows that it is something that is part of our Community Builder Challenge. And so, for example, if you had an event saying we want to do a movie night, and at the movie night we're going to be showing some sort of film around, maybe it's Cool Runnings from 1994, which, it's a sports-based movie, but the attendees themselves aren't being active. That would not be considered, that would not score very highly in terms of our granting criteria. So the event really should have a prominent feature of physical activity where the attendees themselves are moving, are getting active. That fourth question I've talked about a few times now, but we really are stressing the importance of making your activity accessible to all members of the community. And then lastly, we'd like to know how your organization will promote the Participaction Community Better Challenge. And that really is to help us rally the overall excitement for your community around this challenge, as opposed to your organization hosting an event that people would come to, but not really make those strong connections to saying, this is for our community. This is for the Community Better Challenge. Here's, as a community member, we encourage you to download the Participaction app, for example, and stay active year round. And one last small point to recognize is that when I do put those character limits, those characters do include spaces. So so we do also encourage people to be succinct, use bullet points. If it says 300 characters and you only use 200 characters, that is totally fine. So how to apply? On January 25th, if you go to the Participaction website and visit community.participaction.com, you will see a big purple button, I believe, that will say apply for a grant now. So click that apply button, fill out those questions, and submit the application prior to February 28th at 5 p.m. There is a little note here where in the previous 2 years, the application process was done through a Participaction online portal, and you were asked to create a login, create a password, fill out a full organizational profile. And so for this particular survey, we're using a different platform. We're using SurveyMonkey. And so with that being said, you do not need to create an organizational profile. You do not need to create a user ID and have a password. You'll simply click the link and away you go. One of the positives of that is you can start your application right away. A little drawback though is that when you start your application, there isn't sort of a save feature. And so we encourage you to have that kind of time and space ready to do that application in one go, as opposed to in fits and spurts or stops and starts. And to support you with that, we will be, you can see on that bottom note there, we will be sending, or there'll be available offline questions that we can send in advance. So you can see the whole application. We encourage you to kind of fill that out at your leisure, at your own pace in that Microsoft Word format. You can see the character counts within that format as well. And then when it's time to actually submit your application online, you can start copying and pasting those responses, especially those major 5-question responses, into those boxes. So it'll be a little bit easier, because we would hate to see you go through 90% of the application and then have the internet close, or you get pulled away and your browser closes or your computer shuts down and all of your work is removed and you have to start again. So we do encourage you to use that offline form first. And as I said, that will be available to you in the coming days. Looking at timelines. So we should know now. I should stop repeating myself, but January 25th to February 26th is the grant window. The Participaction team will be reviewing all of the grants in March, and we'll be informing the grant applicants in late March and early April. And we do encourage you, we got some feedback from this back in 2019. When you do receive, as a successful grant applicant, when you do receive your check to host your event, please cash it then. Checks sometimes get lost. Checks, especially if checks are, if they're not cashed within 6 months, they need to be reissued. And so even as an organization, if you're not fully sure, the exact dollars and cents of what you're going to spend or how you're going to get your community active, knowing especially this year that things may change, we do encourage you to cash that check and start planning around your physical activity initiatives for the month of June. That also serves with us just as a good sort of a good accountability receipt to say, okay, we know that you're with us, you're on board, you're ready to go. Now, we can't talk about anything in 2020 or 2021 without really identifying, without addressing COVID-19 and and how this has impacted some of our work. And over the course of last year, we have conducted our own bits of surveys. We have conducted some, done some research into some other group surveys, looking at different statistical data to kind of understand a little bit of how the physical activity sector, the sport and recreation sector, has been impacted by COVID-19 and what that may look like for the future. And in all of those findings, one of the things that we want to kind of really bring home and really make sure is known is that what we are looking to do with our community challenge grants is provide inclusive opportunities for all Canadians to be active in a safe manner while socially connecting within their communities. And we can't stress that safe manner enough, knowing that this is a national program, knowing that every community has their own sort of needs or responsibilities or responses or protocols. And so we do want to kind of put safety at the forefront. And we also know that the Community Better Challenge has a fantastic opportunity to re-energize communities to get active, especially thinking about different programs and activities that have been paused or canceled due to COVID-19. And thinking about, we are optimistically looking at June as that kind of re-energizing point. And again, knowing that how that energy takes shape, be it virtually, socially distanced, outdoors, is sort of a varied response. But I did want to share with you a little bit about what we learned from our research into how COVID-19 has affected the sports sector in 2020. And so there's three main things here. One is that we have found a pent-up demand, which is to say that we know that people are itching, are yearning, are wanting to get out and be active again, because we haven't had that experience for quite some time for many of us. We know that programs themselves are being modified, and so we've seen declines in program registration. And let's go back. Sorry about that. We know that programs are being modified, and we've seen some of those declines in registration numbers. We also know that fewer events are happening. And when I say an event versus a program, an event is more of those kind of bigger, school-wide assemblies or community-wide festivals, where a program is more of like your weekly standard soccer practice. And so programs are still happening, but they are modified, where fewer larger events are happening. And we expect that as well within the Community Better Challenge applications, where when you are applying for an application, you can say we do have a program. It is already, it is safe, it is running, it is effective, and we can use some funding. Instead of having the one big event, maybe we can track activity across 4 times. We're going to be doing our program 4 times over the course of the challenge period, and can track all of those times. And here are some of the ways that we're going to make our particular program barrier-free or more inclusive, or to bring in some new people into the opportunity that we are providing. So with that in mind, Participaction, we have made some Community Better Challenge adaptations. The first is that we have increased kind of what I'm calling organizational flexibility. So we are allowing organizations to track virtual events this year. That is certainly fine. We are, as I mentioned, encouraging that kind of more programmatic tracking to say, let's track what we are always doing in that kind of weekly or daily basis. We are reframing our positioning. And so that's just even in the language that I've been using in this webinar, we're not talking so much about the prizes or the competition or winning, knowing that, knowing that within this challenge that we are looking at that point to re-energize and reconnect with our communities, which has been a challenging period so far. And we'll talk a little bit into the future about the Participaction app. We've developed some new features this year that are very COVID friendly, that encourage that kind of social connection, that team building, that those positive benefits connected to physical activity and mental health, while being able to operate virtually and maintain those public health regulations. And that's that last point to stress, is that as we are planning into the future, we know that we must take public health regulations, considerations, and local protocols into consideration as we are planning, and be adaptable, or be able to adapt and be flexible to those things. So going back to that organizational flexibility point, at Participaction as a funder, we're also looking to be flexible. So you may apply in February to say this is what we're planning on doing in June, and as things change, maybe you're not able to do exactly what you've planned, and at Participaction we say that's okay. We're kind of looking at that bottom line intent of saying, what can you do as an organization to engage your community and get them active? And so if that means the dates change, or that means the anticipated numbers change, so be it. Let's do the best we can with what we've got. Now let's talk about the future. So we're going to look at the Community Better Challenge 2021. And so I'm going to share with you 3 things to know. 1 is the key info about the challenge. 2 is a little bit about the individual tracking, and 3 is that group tracking piece. And it is, as we talk about the most active community in Canada and the different provinces and territories, it is really a combination. And when we talk about getting Canadians moving more, it is a combination of both those things, of having individuals participate, individuals, their families, their coworkers, as well as organizations and groups. So everyone kind of working together to get active and really get that social engagement happening. So as we look into next year's challenge, we are looking at more days, which is really exciting. I mentioned the previous challenge was May 31st to June 16th. And this challenge, we're looking at the full month of June 1st to June 30th. And there are a couple of kind of milestone days within there. June as a whole is Recreation Month. There's also National Running Day on June 3rd. National Health and Fitness Day is June 5th. National Indigenous Peoples Day is June 21st. And all of these days, if you're thinking around kind of connecting activities or events around these things, you are certainly welcome to do so. And the second note is more competing communities. This is a really exciting piece for us. So in 2019, the number of competing communities, or communities that were eligible to win the different prizes, was about 1,370. And at that point in time, the minimum population size for a community was about 1,500 people. And this year, we've taken a closer look kind of at the map, at the communities, and we've lowered the overall population threshold from 1,500 down to 1,000. And as a result, we now have 2,500 eligible competing communities. And if you do have any particular questions around, what community am I in? Where does my postal code go? You can certainly send those our way, and we can help answer those questions. I do want to talk a little bit about the Participaction app, and this is the individual tracking piece. So as we are getting ready for the community challenge, one of the things that everyone can do today is download the Participaction app, is share the app with their friends and family. And as you can see here, the Participaction app is Canada's free physical activity app. It's designed by experts, it's rooted in behavior change theory, and it really is a fantastic resource to help you be better informed around physical activity and be more active and be more motivated and encouraged. You can see on that middle screen there, the first screen on the left, that's kind of the Participaction app homepage. So you can see there's a progress wheel, or the odometer that has that big 65 to say you've tracked 65 minutes this week. And as you are more active, that progress goes up, and you kind of get that motivation. The middle screen there is a screenshot from our Great Big Move Challenge. I'll talk a little bit about our in-app challenges on the next slide. And the third screen you see there is an article. So within the Participaction app, there's part health tracker. So you can track your physical activity minutes. There's part in-team challenges, and then part articles and workout videos and different tips on how to stay active. And the headline there is a little bit small, but it says 5 ways exercise can help your mental health. And so there's that knowledge piece as well as the tracking piece. And I haven't even mentioned the prizing piece yet, but we will get there. So with individual tracking, this is one of the new things that we introduced in 2020. And this is, as I mentioned before, very, very in line with part of this COVID mentality. So we have launched the Great Big Move. That was back in October. We are currently in the middle of True North, our winter challenge. And we are looking forward to our Community Better Challenge. And within these challenges, as an app user, we are encouraging you to join a team of 2 to 8 people And so that can be, your distant relatives that you haven't been connecting with, or your coworkers who you maybe aren't seeing in person anymore, or the sports team that you've played with for years and haven't been able to go back out on the basketball court. But really to connect with those groups socially that maybe you haven't been able to connect with as much as before, and work together. And how the challenges work is there are milestones along the way. So within the Great Big Move and with True North, you are looking at pooling your team minutes. So if I'm active for 100 minutes today and you're active for 200 minutes, that's 300 minutes for our team to unlock milestones along the way. And as you unlock those milestones, you can earn those participation. You can earn the Great Big Move badge or the True North badge. And specifically with the True North, which is going on right now from until January 31st, if you complete all of those milestones, if you unlock all of the milestones here are winter gear. So if you unlock the skis and the toque and the skates, then you'll be eligible to receive a $500 gift card to Sport Check, and that's for every single team member. And it really is it's a great way. You can see a leaderboard, you can see who's been active today, and you can encourage and motivate your fellow teammates to be active. And so this is something new that we've introduced this year that really allows the Participaction app, which has always been sort of an individual activity, into be used as a social activity, because you can see other people's activity and create those teams. And the second thing, or one of the last things I want to talk to you about before we open it up for questions, is group tracking. So this is many of you as physical activity leaders or sport and recreation leaders or community development organizations. This is what we're asking you to do. And so as you receive your Community Better Challenge grant, or if you're unsuccessful in a grant and are still hosting an event or just hosting an event, we do encourage all organizations to track the activity of their groups. And we're trying to make it as straightforward as possible. So on the Participaction website, you put in the date, the number of participants, and the average number of minutes of physical activity. So we don't need you to tell us, that you had 12 participants and one person was active for 50 minutes and one person was active for 30 minutes and one person showed up for 2 minutes and then left. We're looking sort of at the overall average, just to get that sense of how many people were active during your event. And then that second bullet there says that events do not need to be a Community Challenge grant event to count. And so anything that's happening in your community, if it's a community walk, if it's a phys ed class or a soccer practice or a group fitness class at a recreation center, whatever it is that may be, all physical activity can be tracked, all can be counted, all can go towards your community score. And so looking at your role as a local champion is to encourage groups to apply for grants, yourselves included. And then as we're getting closer to the challenge dates, registering and tracking activity on the Community Challenge website, and encouraging individuals to, if they haven't already, download the Participaction app and start seeing those health benefits around tracking activity, and knowing that's a great way to stay motivated, or getting those exercise videos and articles to progress along their physical activity journey. And then as we are going into the future, we will be developing a few different resources. You can see that call out box there. So we will be creating some physical kits to help promote your programs. And those kits will be available for grant recipients should they choose. That's one of the questions, is to say, would you like a physical kit? We'll be creating digital kits as we have in the past to help plan events. And there will be some tips on making sure that how to make those events inclusive, accessible, and safe. And so we'll have digital kits specifically for schools, and then specifically for workplaces, and lastly for kind of broader community organizations. Looking into the future, we are going to be hosting another webinar on tracking and reporting and some of those additional expectations we've talked about a little bit here. And lastly, one of the primary focuses for Participaction this year focuses on newcomer engagement. And so we have been supported by the Public Health Agency of Canada as one of their Common Vision champions. And our project this year is really trying to understand and better support newcomer engagement in the Participaction Community Better Challenge. So that can be from supporting organizations to supporting organizations to adapt some programming so that they are best suited for newcomer engagement, to doing some engagement with engagement and consultations with newcomers themselves, and working more closely with newcomer serving organizations like settlement agencies around sharing some information around the challenge and sharing some information around the grants of getting those groups active. And so we've conducted different research and consultations, and we'll be creating some resources specifically for you into the spring that we'll be sharing. And so that's about the those are the big ticket things for our community challenge. And I think in summary, one of the key messages to get across is that participating in the challenge not only supports your community, but also gets you moving and reaping the benefits of physical activity like improved mood, increased energy, reduced feelings of stress and worry, and a stronger sense of connection with others. And so that's as you're going through your grant application, as you're thinking about what is it that we're trying to do, I encourage you again to kind of think back to that community benefit. Think about those benefits of physical activity, and root your planning, root your ideas in that, and you'll be off to a fantastic start. And so with that, I will stop talking and start listening. If there are questions, that I know that we've had our staff team responding to questions, but I'll take a look now and answer any of the questions that to cover here. Okay, so I have a question within that, within the eligible expenses. There's a question on what do you mean by nutrition? And so by that, we really mean healthy snacks. And so we know that one of the barriers, for example, or one of the ways to increase participation in activity is to provide food. And so when we say you can fund for nutrition, that really is, we're not looking at kind of cake and pop and chips. We're looking at kind of fruit and water, or non-sugary drinks as certainly an eligible expense. Another question is, will we receive materials after this presentation? The answer is yes. So there'll be an email that has a recording of this presentation, and resources will be available on the Participaction website. We have a question that says, where does your funding come from? And so we are largely funded by a few different agencies, largely by the federal government. And so our primary funding comes from the Public Health Agency of Canada. We also have funding from Sport Canada, or the Department of Canadian Heritage. And we also have provincial support as well. So the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is one of our funding partners. There's a question that says, can more than one group, for example, a school and a nonprofit agency and the municipality, all access funds for different programs, even if they're in the same town? And so that answer is yes. There's no limit to grant applications, and there's not a cap in terms of our funding for a particular competing community or a municipality. And so we do encourage the school to apply, the local sport organization to apply, the municipality themselves to apply, a local business to apply, if they're able to provide those physical activity events. We do, as we are allocating our grant funds, it is worth noting that we do take our total amount of money and do an initial analysis of the total population of Canada. And so it is worth noting that, a larger province like Ontario is going to receive more grant dollars, or a proportional amount of grant dollars, relative to that of Prince Edward Island, which has a smaller population. So there's another question here saying, are private businesses eligible to request grant money? The answer is yes, they are. And one of the specific aspects of that is thinking around those equity-seeking groups, or thinking around providing an opportunity for physical activity participation that is barrier-free or low cost. One of the questions we ask around is kind of the quality of physical education. And so, yes, you are eligible to request grant money, and it is, and yeah, just trying to think about what can you do to get your community active in that safe, healthy, inclusive manner. One of the questions is saying, is event advertising an eligible expense as we're looking to expand our participation in the community? And so that answer is yes. We know that if you're putting on a fantastic event with great programming and everything else, it's a shame to put all of that work in and not have the people come through the door. And so there certainly is space to put in some support for that local advertising. There's another question that says, can different programs in the same agency apply for a grant? And so this is, I think I can clarify this question, where we do have some organizations that may have multiple chapters, or within our grant guidelines, it says we can only allow $1,000 per organization. And an example that I can use is with, for example, the Boys and Girls Club of British Columbia, where there are multiple local chapters or local branches within the Boys and Girls Club, and each of those local chapters is eligible to receive that grant. And so even though the check may ultimately always be written to the Boys and Girls Club of British Columbia, we're looking kind of at that umbrella organization, or having those multiple locations or multiple agencies within a larger organization. So think about it more in terms of that geographic location, as individual locations, or especially locations that are within different competing communities, would all be eligible to receive funding. There's another question saying, I'm interested in, the program that I'm looking at serving is for one particular health equity seeking group. And is that okay, or does the event need to be open to everyone in the public? And the answer to that is no. It's so if you are interested in having an event specifically for women and girls, or specifically geared towards older adults, yes, that is perfectly acceptable to put that forward. There's a question saying, can you share the mental health and activity resource you mentioned earlier? I don't think I can readily, but I can encourage you to download the app. And so within the Participaction app, there's many pieces of content, and there is the little magnifying glass. There is a search feature, and if you can just type in mental health, and you'll see a large list of different articles and resources that all connect with that. I also encourage you to go to the Participaction website, participaction.com/happybetter, where we specifically talk about how physical activity is good for your happiness and your mood. So I'm just going through, so that was kind of going through the chat space, and I'm looking at some of the other questions to see some other answers. So I'll do my best to address those. So one of the questions was noting that the presentation said that the dates being from June 1st to June 30th, but if you are running a program that does like a full summer or spring program running from May 1st to July 15th, is that okay? And the answer is yes. So when we're asking you, when you're applying for funding to say what can we fund a particular program that runs outside of the month of June, or that runs inclusive of June, the answer is yes. Yes, that is certainly eligible. And when you're talking about the tracking, or talking about where the funding will be spent, I think it's important to kind of stress this is what we'll be doing in the month of June. So if it is a weekly program, this is what we're doing on June 2nd, June 9th, June 16th, June 23rd, and June 30th. And so we're really saying you can fund 5 different program events and have 5 opportunities for our community to get active and track. And so there's another question saying, what if the event, I think we've talked about it, where if the event can't be held in June due to COVID restrictions, and we certainly hope that's not the case. We have experienced this in previous years, due to kind of inclement weather or just delays or challenges. And so this goes back to that piece of saying we're looking at supporting organizations as a whole, looking at organizations to get their communities active. And so while the best laid plans are saying we're going to be active in June, If for unforeseen circumstances that can happen, we do encourage you to find another space and another time to get your community active, and just inform us of that as you're going through via email or through the participation survey. Oh, and I did see there's a note. I'm sorry about that. It appears that there's a typo in the PowerPoint presentation where one of the slides are indicated that the grant deadline was the 28th. So I do want to confirm and verify that that is not the case. The grant deadline is February 26th. Thank you for pointing that out. I will correct that for our future webinars. So there's a question around sort of changing from physical to digital toolkits, depending on what that looks like. And so I'll make a little clarification there. A digital toolkit is available for everyone all the time. It is think of it like a PDF manual or a booklet that's more on like tips and advice to get active. Whereas the physical toolkit is something that is mailed to you. It has physical, tangible things that you can feel and touch and share. And so that's an optional thing. You can say, yes, I want to have a physical toolkit, or no, I do not. Whereas the digital toolkit is available for everyone. And so if you're planning on a more virtual event where the contents of that digital toolkit the contents of the physical toolkit may not be relevant or applicable to you, and that for that question within the grant application, you can simply click, no, I'm not interested in having a physical toolkit. So there's a question around those competing communities. This is where can I find information regarding the breakdown of communities? And that's something that will be made available as we finalize and determine the exact parameters of those communities. There will be a list online that breaks down specifically here are those 2,500 communities, here's what they are called and from within each province. If you do have a particular question around where you think, if you have an organization that serves multiple jurisdictions, in terms of what that may look like with various postal codes, I encourage you to send us a note, and we can help give you kind of a more specific answer. But there will be a generic response or a generic list of all those competing communities that will be made available soon. There's a question that says, do activities have to be free for the public to attend, or can there be a small fee charged to participants? So the answer to that is there can be a fee. It is one of the grant application questions. Is there a fee to participate? And so that is part of the grant scoring. We do encourage that minimal fee, as minimal as fee as possible, in terms of making sure that there are reduced barriers for participation. And there's a question saying, with this grant, could it be inclusive to the June Parks and Rec Month activities? So yes, absolutely. The grant can support your existing activities, can be used in conjunction with other grants to make events even bigger, even better. And certainly any activity that you as a recreation leader are doing in June as part of Recreation Month, we encourage you to track to support your support your community and get your community active. And then another question is, do you have digital templates for advertising purposes? And so that's something that will be shared, will be made available within our digital kits. There'll be downloadable materials, kind of social media posts and social media images that you can use. Okay, I think that covers the questions that I can see here. If I have missed your question or if I was unable to get to your question today, then my apologies. And I have my contact information up there on the screen now. So feel free to send me a note at kzolitar@participaction.com or at my phone number there. It's my work phone number, 416-644-0498. I am largely appreciative of a phone call, largely appreciative of a nice conversation. And so please feel free to make a connection, and we will go from there. And so with that, I wish thank you everyone for your time and attention. And at least where I'm at today, coming to you from Toronto, it's a beautiful sunny day. So I will do my best to get outside, and I encourage you to do the same. Thank you so much, everyone.